So, back in 2016, a single piece of legislation came along and basically rewrote the entire rulebook for Kenya's elections. Today, we're going to break down exactly what that law changed, why those changes were so incredibly important, and what it all meant for every single voter. Let's jump right in. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the law, let's just take a step back for a second. Ask yourself this: what actually makes an election feel trustworthy? Is it about total transparency? Is it the accuracy of the final count? Or is it just rock-solid security? That question right there is really the key to understanding all of the changes we're about to unpack. They were all designed to boost public confidence in the whole democratic process. So here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the new election playbook. Then, we'll dive into how the voter register got a major security upgrade. After that, it's all about technology, the new rules for candidates, what changed on election day itself, and finally, we'll pull it all together and see why these changes were such a big deal. Okay, let's start with that new playbook. And look, this wasn't just a minor tweak here and there. The 2016 Act was a really comprehensive overhaul. It amended a bunch of different laws all at once to create a much more modern and, well, integrated way of doing things. The official title of the law actually tells you a lot. Its whole purpose was to amend existing laws, so it wasn't about tearing everything down and starting from scratch. Nope. It was more like a strategic upgrade designed to fix a whole bunch of issues across the system right before the next election cycle. And that brings us to our second point, securing the voter register. I mean, think about it, right? An election is only as credible as its list of voters. If people have doubts about who is and who isn't on that list, it can undermine the whole process. That's exactly why this was such a huge focus of the new law. So the law came at this problem from a few different angles. First, it allowed for a full, professional audit of the entire register. But it also gave power directly to the people, opening up a 30-day window for public verification of their biometric data. And it created an online portal so anyone could inspect it. And, this is a big one, it made providing that biometric data mandatory for anyone who wanted to register. And this wasn't just a casual suggestion. The law put some really strict, non-negotiable timelines in place. An audit could kick off 6 months before the election. Then, at exactly 90 days out, the register had to be opened for that 30-day public checkup. The goal here was to build in plenty of time to catch and fix any problems long before anyone cast a vote. Now for our third section, and honestly, this is where things get really interesting. Technology transforms the vote. The 2016 law really marked this huge shift away from old-school manual processes and put technology right at the very heart of the election. So the law introduced this really important concept, this big idea, the integrated electronic electoral system. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, it wasn't just about, buying a few new tablets. It was about creating a fully interconnected system that had 3 specific, legally required functions. Let's break that down into its 3 main pillars. Pillar number 1 is using biometrics, think fingerprints, to register voters. This creates a totally unique link between a person and their vote. Pillar number 2 is using that same biometric data to electronically identify the voter at the polling station on election day. And pillar number 3 is transmitting the results electronically, right from the polling station. And to avoid those last-minute tech failures that can just destroy public trust, the law got super strict about buying all this new gear. All election technology now had to be purchased a full 8 months before an election. And, critically, it had to be tested, verified, and ready to go at least 60 days out. This was a clear attempt to build in a safety buffer to get the tech right. Okay, moving on to Section 4, new rules for candidates. Because these changes didn't just impact the election officials and the voters, they also put political parties and anyone wanting to run for office on a much tighter and more organized schedule. The law basically moved the entire timeline up for candidates. Deadlines got pushed earlier across the board. If you were an independent, you now had to declare your intentions 90 days out. Political parties, they had to get their final list of candidates in 60 days before the election. This gave the commission a much longer runway to prepare things like ballot papers. Just to give you a specific example, look at the deadline for party candidates. It went from 45 days to 60 days before the election. Now that extra 2 weeks might not sound like a lot, but in the world of election logistics, it's a game changer. It just created so much more breathing room and helped cut down on that typical last-minute chaos. Okay, let's get to the main event in Section 5, Election Day and results. How did all these legal changes actually feel on the ground? What was different inside the polling station, and how were the results handled? One of the simplest but most effective changes came down to one single number: 500. The law now put a hard cap on the number of registered voters per polling station at 500, period. And the goal was super straightforward: shorter lines, a quicker voting process, and just a more manageable day for everybody. The law also laid out a really specific tech-first path for the presidential results. It starts with electronic transmission, which was now mandatory, straight from the polling stations. Those results get collected at the constituency level, then verified nationally. And, this part is absolutely crucial, the law demanded that the final result forms from the polling stations be published on a public online portal for everyone to see. That was a huge leap forward for transparency. So, let's pull all these threads together in our final section. Why did all of this actually matter? What was the big picture philosophy that was driving every single one of these changes? You know, you don't even have to guess. There's a direct quote from the law itself that just says it all. The technology had to be, quote, simple, accurate, verifiable, secure, accountable, and transparent. Those 6 words, they perfectly capture the entire spirit of these reforms. So, what are the biggest things to remember here? First, there was a massive push for more transparency, with public online access to both the voter list and the results. Second, those tighter deadlines were all about forcing better preparation for everyone. Third, technology wasn't just a nice-to-have anymore. It was now the mandated core of the whole system. And finally, all of this was designed to create way more accountability through clear, verifiable steps. Ultimately, that 2016 law was a landmark effort to build a stronger, more trustworthy election system using the best tools available at that time. And that really leaves us with a final question to think about. As both laws and technology keep evolving, what's the next frontier for making sure our elections are secure and fair, not just in Kenya, but all around the world?